cannot serve God and wealth. You're going to serve somebody. We're all going to serve something. We're all going to put something as a priority in our lives. It's up to us to decide what it will be. The values of this world, or the values laid out for us by Jesus. I tell you, we sometimes get stuck in things and we can't get out of them. For example, I brought a couple of magazines that come to me at the church. And right after I started here, I got my first Interpreter magazine. Some of you leaders in the church get these magazines as well. And actually, if anybody would like to get one, you can sign up to find out what's going on with the Greater United Methodist Church. You can get it by email too. So, well, the first one I got after I moved here was addressed to Reverend Michael Baker-Strebe. I do not know Michael Baker-Strebe. And we called, right? Where's Peggy at? Yeah, we called and said, there's no such person as Michael Baker-Strebe here. And so, yeah, oh, thank goodness. You know, they were going to take care of it. Well, the next month, after we finally got it straightened out, we got one addressed to Reverend Paul Baker. And we also got one to Reverend Michael Baker-Strebe. I'm coming up on 6 years here, folks. Right, Peggy? And every month we get an extra one to Reverend Michael Baker-Strebe. So I've got a nephew named Michael Baker, but I don't know. As far as I know, he's not a reverend. But we get stuck. There's a story too about this guy who is collecting fleas. And he had them in a jar, a mason jar, the lid, you know, and the fleas would jump up in the jar. They'd jump up and down. And they'd hit their head on the jar. And finally one day the guy says, I'm going to let them go. So he takes the lid off the jar, unscrews it, sets it down. And those fleas, they jumped exactly the same height as the lid. They'd gotten used to hitting their heads on the lid. They were free. But did they know they were free? Not at all. There's a lesson in that for us, that we get used to things. We can't change the things that we think are just silly, and then we can't change. We get used to life the way it is, and we forget that we are free to change our lives, to follow Christ more closely in all we say and in all we do. I found some funny things from church bulletins that I wanted to share too. There's one, a church newsletter said, "Don't let worry kill you off. Let the church help." Or listen to this one. "Ladies, don't forget the rummage sale. It's a chance to get rid of those things not worth keeping around the house. Don't forget your husbands." Or "The peacemaking meeting scheduled for today has been canceled due to a conflict." You know, all these crazy things that happen. Well, today we want to talk about our values, really, and how do we use money? How do we use money? Because it really does show where we believe, what we believe. You see there two thought bubbles, you know, the cross or the dollar sign representing the values of the world. It really does show where we believe. If you want to figure out what you believe, make a note, write down where you spend your money in the next week. Where does it go? What's most important to us? Well, if only we Christians were as eager and ingenious, industrious as those criminals that Jesus lifted up. You know, they knew what they valued, and they were out to get it. They were out, but we're like, the image here is crossing the road of life, you know, crossing the river of life, and how do we get to the other side? If only we were as eager and ingenious in living out our faith as people are living other ways. How does it feel to know that Jesus lifted up a couple of scoundrels for us to look at? Because these people are bad. The manager was bad. The master was bad. The people who got to write off their bill were bad? Well, maybe not bad people, but they acted wrongly. And Jesus lifts up their ingenuity at getting what they wanted. The thing is that Jesus wants us to want something different. And do the best. We anticipate the kingdom. We make the choice to follow Christ. How do we do it? It's, I read a little bit about Heroes of Philip Yancey. He's one of my favorite authors, and he talks about people he admires. He talks about finding this one fellow, Dr. Paul Brandt. I've mentioned him before. He found a group that was overlooked and underserved. He gave up his medical practice and went to Africa and discovered that he was the one that figured out what causes leprosy, that leprosy is caused not by the sores. I mean, it's a lack of feeling pain. Am I right, doctor? Yes, good. I gotta double check my facts. By not feeling pain, we don't notice that we need to do something to correct the results of what's hurting us. And it sometimes leads to death in the case of leprosy. It's a good lesson, but the lesson I really want to lift up is this man cared enough about where God was leading him to give up everything that the world values to go and make a difference in people's lives. He was eager and he was ingenious. We are to use material goods, it says, to cement friendships. That's what that evil guy in the story did. He said, I need people to be my friend when I lose my job. Well, we, too, are to use what we have. Money is simply a tool, like the church is a tool, like the Bible's a tool, like a hammer is a tool. You know, it reminds me, remember you hear anybody say, well, if that doesn't fit, just get a bigger hammer, you know. You've heard that, I'm sure. I've done it. Well, sometimes money is the right tool for the job. And we are to use it in the right way. Making disciples for Christ is our job, and material wealth is a part of that. It is. If there's one thing that we forget about our own generosity is a lot of times it's not just the one who receives whose life is changed, but it truly is the one who gives, who recognizes that God is using them and it changes their hearts. I find that that's true for me. Sometimes I kind of go, oh, well, I could give $100 to that, but what else could I do with $100? The only time I feel good is when I decide to give. Let's see. Well, okay, so there's 3 points that I want to bring out here. 3 possible ways to interpret this. And the first one is we should be smart. We've talked about that. We should be ingenious and we should be eager. The second one is that we should get to know the right people. We should use our material wealth to make a difference in the world and get to know the right people that need to know that they're loved. And the last one is this, that we should be faithful in small things. There's a part of the scripture we didn't read, a couple verses in there that I left out, but it says that if you are trustworthy in small things, you will be given greater things. Not greater things for your own benefit, but greater things. You'll be entrusted with a much more deep and meaningful task. The proof of that comes in so many ways. I read about a writer that said that somebody taught him that we are to be here Not just to help each other along the way, but to help each other to be greater people. He said his first employer as a writer was somebody that would correct his mistakes and help him to become a better writer, right? But he also, the thing that he remembers about that employer is that that person helped him to be a better person. That's why we're here, to let people know they're loved. That's the thing I took away from Emmaus. I'm really loved, you know? It's hard to even say that. God is with us today and helping us to be faithful in sharing that love. Well, this parable that we just read, it's interesting because it comes right before, remember the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, where the rich man misuses his wealth and doesn't help anybody out, and then the rich man ends up, well, you know where you don't want to go, right? This message is all throughout Scripture. We must use the resources that God has given us in productive ways to serve God's kingdom. It's our calling. It's a part of our calling. And sometimes we just don't see it. There's another story about, I'm going to do this one real quick, but there's a story about a guy, a captain, that was on an aircraft carrier, and he's going along, he sees a light coming towards him, and he gets on the radio and says, "Sir, alter your course 15 degrees to the west." And the radio message comes back and it says, "Sir, alter your course 15 degrees to the east." And no, alter your course 15 degrees to the west. And it goes back and forth like this. And finally, the guy in the aircraft carrier, the captain, he says, "Sir, I am a captain in the United States Navy. Alter your course 15 degrees to the west." And the guy comes back, he says, "I'm Seaman Baker. Alter your course 15 degrees to the east, and I am a lighthouse." Who do you think was going to win that one, huh? Sometimes we think we see things clearly. What I want to remind you of today is that it makes a difference how we use the gifts that God has given us. And I mean gifts of your heart, gifts of your love, gifts of your forgiveness, gifts of healing, but also the material possessions. You know, I was actually going to bring, and I forgot because I was so busy this weekend, but I was going to bring one of my windsurfing boards and show you. It cost me, I bought one, I finally bought one. For years I haven't bought one, and we had a little extra money. And so I spent $1,600 on a windsurfing board. And I felt so guilty. And you know what? Right after that, some things came up. And I thought, oh man, if I had that $1,600, I could do that. You know, what I'm trying to tell you is that we make choices. Sometimes we do things for ourselves. And then we find out later that, oh, if I had those resources, I maybe could have done this, that, or the other thing that would have made a much greater, lasting impression on this, God's kingdom. So please, be careful with the way you use your resources, because it matters not just to God, it matters to your soul as well. That's the lesson of this parable. So go in peace.